Hello, welcome to Snails and Fairy Dust. Today I'd like to show you how to make these brick stitch earrings with looped fringe. It's a new reworked pattern of mine. I'm calling it Lovely Day because they really just make me happy. um, I have the pattern available on my website or my Etsy shop. The links are below. And you may notice that each earring is different. It's two different designs, sort of, they go together, but they are actually different, which makes it fun. Let's take a look at the supplies. I'm using Miyuki Delica seed beads, or Miyuki Delica beads. I have a size 12 beading needle. I have these leverback ear wires, which are my favorite to use. I have these thread guards. I also have a fire line in 6-pound weight, and I'm going to be using the fire line also for the fringe in this piece. I have scissors and I have my pattern. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, in order to create brick stitch, you need to have a foundation stitch to build it on, and that is called ladder stitch, what we're going to be using. And so to begin my ladder stitch, I pick up the first 2 beads in the first row of my pattern, and I slide them down towards the end of my thread. And I take my needle and loop it around and come back up through the first bead. And that is going to make the beads sit next door to each other side by side like this. I'm just sliding because I want to leave at least a 4-inch tail so I could weave it back in. And then I'm going to take my needle and come back down that second bead. And that will complete the loop. There we go. And then I'm going to pick up my next bead and I'm going to come down through the top of the previous bead. Pull that so that it's sitting next door to each other, like so. And then to complete that loop, I'm going to come up through that bead I've just added. There we go. And let's do that again. I pick up my next bead. I'm going to come up through the previous bead, pull that so it's next door to each other, and then come down through that new bead. There we go. And I'm just going to continue to build the row this way, 1 bead at a time. In this pattern, there are actually 25 beads at that first row. So here we go. We're coming down through the previous bead and up through the new bead. And you see the beads are forming this little sort of ladder, which is why it's called ladder stitch. And you want to try to keep the space in between the beads to a minimum because you need it to be sort of strong and secure since it's the foundation row for your whole piece. So you keep building this row of ladder stitch, and I will meet you back here when you get to the end of it, and then we will get started with our brick stitch. Okay, so keep on going, take your time, make sure the beads are nice and tight and secure next to each other, and I'll see you back here. Okay, so here we are. We have finished our first row of ladder stitch, and now we're going to begin our brick stitch. And to build a brick stitch, we're going to look at these little thread bridges that connect the beads in the ladder stitch, and that's what we're going to build on. So I'm going to pick up 2 beads in my next row, and I'm going to slide my needle underneath the second thread bridge from the outside, just like that. And then in order to get these beads to stand up the way we want them to, we're going to come back up through that second bead. And then we go down through the first bead. And then we're going to come up through the second bead again. And when we pull this tightly, those two beads will be sitting next to each other. And they're sort of like off center of the beads directly below them, the way you would build a brick wall, which is why it's called brick stitch. And now I'm going to pick up my next bead, bring my needle underneath the next thread bridge, and then come straight back up through that bead. So from here on out, we're only adding one bead at a time. So when you start the row, it's 2 beads. When you're building the rest of the row, it's just 1 bead at a time. So I pick up my next bead, I slide it underneath the next thread bridge, and I pull it through. And then I'm going to come right back up through that same bead. Try to keep my other threads out of the way. And I just keep building this row 1 bead at a time. Take your time. And when you get to the end of it, you will start the next row. And when you do get to the end of it, meet me back here and I will show you how to start a row again, because I believe that's the trickiest part of brick stitch. So sometimes it's just good to take a look at that again. So I'll see you back here in a second. Okay, so here we are. We finished our second row and we're going to begin our third row. And I just want to show you one more time how to begin the row. So we pick up 2 beads, we slide underneath that second thread bridge, and then we come back up through the second bead, and then down through the first bead, and back up through the second bead. And now things should be getting a little bit easier because you have more to hold on to. I sometimes find single brick stitch to be a bit tricky to start with because there's just not a lot to hold on to and it can be really finicky. But now you have a bit more substantial piece to hold on to, and I hope things are starting to feel easier for you. So you keep weaving and meet me back here in a second, and I'm going to show you how I end a thread and start a new one. Okay, so here we are. My thread has run out. I am going to take this thread and just weave it back down into the piece. And then I'm going to secure it by looping around these just find 2 neighboring beads and sort of weave around them a couple of times. And that will create tension, which will keep your thread from coming unraveled. So I'm doing that here. I've gone around, I think 2 or 3 times now. And then I'm just going to take my needle down a couple more rows, and then I am free to clip that thread. And then I'm going to cut a new piece, thread my needle, and I'm going to do the same thing, but sort of in reverse. So I pull it through, leave a little tail there, and then I'm going to weave around these 2 neighboring beads to create the tension. And there we go. So we're going around once, twice. You could always give it a little tug and you'll know for sure that it's secure. But really, it only takes 2 or 3 times and you should be good to go. Just make sure your thread you're pulling it tight and you're hiding the thread in between the beads. When you pull it snugly, it should disappear right in between those cracks. And then I'm just going to run my needle up the edge of my beadwork, directly to the edge, which will leave my needle exiting out exactly where I would have been if I hadn't started a new thread. The key is you don't want to have to start a new thread in the middle of a row. It's much easier if you do it at the beginning or the end of a row. And now I'm just ready to continue on where I was. So we're going to keep doing that, working our rows back and forth up to the top until it's time to add our thread guard. So meet me back here when you get to the top of your pyramid and we will do that. Okay, so here we are. We reached the top of our pyramid. It's looking super cute. And we're going to add a thread guard. You could also add beads at the top, but I prefer using the thread guard. I just feel it's much more secure and your thread is guarded, hence the name. So there's not so much wear and tear on it. So you bring your needle through one side of the thread guard and then down through the other side of the thread guard and through the bead directly below it, like so. And then we want to do that one more time. So we're going to come back up through that first bead. and then down through the thread guard and the second bead on the other side, like that. Make sure your thread stays inside of this little channel at the top because that's what actually protects it. And then now we could just simply take that thread, weave it down into the work, and secure it the way we did when we were ending our thread before. Um, and then we'll be able to clip that, and we're going to start a new thread for our fringe. So meet me back here to start the fringe thread, and we will take a look at that. Okay, one more thing before we do the fringe. If you still have that tail from the very beginning, just put a needle on that and weave that into your work too to get it out of your way. Okay, so now we're going to add the fringe for our thread. I am going to just anchor it a couple rows up from the bottom of the pyramid, and using that same technique, weaving around the two neighboring beads to anchor it. Do that 2 or 3 times. Give it a good tug. Make sure it's not going anywhere. And then you are going to take your needle and just run the thread down the outside edge of the pyramid. So here I am working up so I could get to that place. And now I'm just going to come down this outside edge until I end up on the outside corner, the first bead in that row of ladder stitch, which is where we will begin our fringe. Okay, now we are ready to add our fringe. We have our needle coming out of the outside edge, and we're going to add the fringe from our pattern. And you don't need to see that, so let's fast forward. And here we have all the beads, and I'm going to take my needle and then come to the direct opposite bead on the opposite side of the work and come up through it, like so. And then I'm going to bring my needle down through the neighboring bead in that row of ladder stitch, like this. And there we go. And now I'm going to add my next row of looped fringe. So let's do some magic here. Here are the beads. And then we do the same thing. We're going to come up to that next bead from the outside, the second bead from the outside, and bring it straight up through there, and then bring it straight down through the neighboring bead in that row of ladder stitch. And we're just going to keep repeating that process, working towards the inside of our pyramid, always working in that row of ladder stitch at the bottom. That's our the row we're building off of and weaving into. And we're just going to keep doing that till we get to our last row. There are 5 rows of looped fringe in this pattern. And when we get to the last one, we're just going to secure our thread. So I'll see you here in a second. Okay, so here we are. We've added our last row of fringe, and I'm just going to, again, weave that needle into the work, hide my threads, make some tension so things aren't going to fall apart here. And with this last one, I'll probably do a few times. I will do, 2 or 3 rounds of just looping around some beads to make sure it's extra super secure. And then I will clip my thread, and I can add my ear wires. Okay, here we are. I have my ear wires. Mine have an open ring at the bottom, so I'm just going to open them a little bit with my pliers and then close them back on there. You could also, if you don't have pliers, you don't have open ear wires with open rings at the bottom, you could string these on when you're adding your thread guard. I just prefer to do it this way so the ear wires aren't in my way while I'm making it. And here we go. We have our earrings, super cute. I can't wait to wear them this summer. I hope you're very proud of yourself. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the peace of beading, the calmness that it brings to you. And I hope you will subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.